You know, there's nothing like a good old RPG. Running into some random cave, slaying a pack of goblins or some cave bandits, looting chests full of gold and lockpicks and other random stuff that people really wouldn't throw into a chest, traveling back to town with a sack full of loot and making out with piles of coin. I will never get tired of this gameplay experience. However, like a beautiful flower or a big old plate of bloomin' onion, the RPG genre is constantly expanding with new innovations to freshen up the gameplay experience. So much so, in fact, that if you can even think of a game genre, then it's likely to have some titles with at least a couple of RPG characteristics. One such genre is the ever so popular survival genre. Now let's be honest, you know what a survival game is. You could take all of the games that exist on Steam, arrange them onto a dartboard, close your eyes and blindly throw a dart, and it will probably land on a survival game. These fucking games are as common as pennies, but they do have a really interesting gameplay loop. Going from rags to riches, becoming self-sufficient, and maximizing efficiency. It makes for an incredibly addicting gameplay loop, so what if we took that and mixed that in with an action RPG? Well, then you get the beautiful concoction that is Outward. Now, Outward stands more as a survival game rather than an RPG, but it blends these two genres together so well that it stands on its own as a unique style of game. It perfectly encapsulates the feeling of a grand adventure and flips the logic of an action RPG almost entirely on its head. While it's certainly not the best looking RPG, and it is rough around the edges, this is still an underrated indie classic that I would recommend to anyone who's looking for a unique style of RPG. So enough fooling around, let's dive in and see what this game is about. Just a small disclaimer before we start the video, I am using a couple of mods in this game, so your game is probably going to look a little bit different than mine. I'm mostly using a mod that gives me timers for all of the buffs, so I don't have to go into another menu just to see how much time I have left on my buffs. And I'm also using a transmogrification mod, so I can change some of my backpacks around so you don't see a giant box on my character for the entire game. So once you start a new game, you get to create a character and Jesus Christ, what the fuck is this? Yeah, the character creation looks pretty bad. And this is the definitive version of the game, which brought along a lot of features that improved the character model. So this looked even worse in the original version of the game. So once you get past all the doughy faces, you have a couple of character creation options and a legacy option, which I'll explain later. So your story begins at the remains of a crashed ship. You wake up and gather your bearings, and this serves as a very rough tutorial to the core mechanics of the game. Finding clothes and picking berries, gathering water, very basic combat and applying bandages, resting, things like that. Once you wake up, you're now in a lighthouse with a mob of villagers beating down your door. These are members of the Blue Chamber Collective, a hard-working tribe of laborers that value the sacrifice of your own conveniences for the good of the community. Also, you're viewed as a bloodline instead of an individual, and you're forced to pay reparations for debts that your ancestors accumulated under the threat of exile. Swell bunch of guys, I know. So you're given 5 days to either scrounge up 150 silver, which is just a tiny fraction of your actual blood price, obtain a tribal favor by helping another member of the collective, or permanently lose your home. It's at this point that the game opens up and you're left to your own devices. Maybe you'll want to go the scavenger route, combing through every street corner and rummaging every pile of junk you can find. Maybe you'll go the mercenary route, obtaining fetch quests from NPCs and going out adventuring into the world to find a special item. Maybe you'll go the hunter-gatherer route, fishing and mining to get valuable gems and rare fish to pawn off. While it's possible to obtain the silver required to pay off your debt without even leaving the starting town, most players will probably have to venture outside the city walls and face the harsh wilderness. Well, I got this one quest from an NPC that asked me to go into this cave somewhere and get a mushroom shield. So let's do that and see if we can find this tribal favor along the way. So you talk to Berg, get a starting skill for whatever weapon you want to use for early game, exit town, open your map to find out where to go, and Where the fuck are the quest markers? That's right, the game does not have quest markers. Now I know most modern RPG fans probably recoiled in fear from that statement, but I actually like how the game doesn't use these giant arrows to point you towards every objective. Because look at how fucking beautiful this landscape is. The environment is your quest marker. All of the locations that have markers on your map are so unique that they serve as natural reference points to orientate yourself. You're meant to get lost, stumble across something new in your travels, or explore some point of interest just for the fuck of it. The world of Aurai is very unforgiving, and many of the mechanics in the game reflect that. From the exploration to the survival and to the oh so controversial combat mechanics. Dear God, I can't count how many people have posted Reddit threads or negative Steam reviews lamenting the game's combat system. And honestly, I really can't blame them. This game is very complex, and at times it can be a little too complex. A lot of this game's mechanics aren't explained through tutorials, and I commonly hear people compare this game's combat system to Dark Souls. And no, it's not Dark Souls, dude. Yes, there is a dodge roll that gives you iframes, and you can't cancel your attacks, so you have to commit to every swing. But if you go into this game thinking you're going to get Dark Souls combat, then you're going to be greatly disappointed. I'll break down Outward's combat for any new players wanting to pick this game up. You see this health bar right here? Take that and just throw it away somewhere. Forget about it right now. What you should be focusing on is this little white bar that's underneath the health bar. This is the stability gauge, and this functions similarly to the posture system in Sekiro. Every character in the game has a stability meter that prevents them from getting staggered. However, if this stability meter gets below 50%, then your enemy will start getting staggered with each hit. And if you either stagger your opponent 3 times or completely deplete their stamina meter, they will fall flat on their ass, giving you a window to either back off and heal or step in and do some big damage. Similarly to Sekiro, you don't want to rely on rolling to avoid physical damage, as most physical weapons can be blocked without severely impacting your stamina or stability gauge, so long as you're not playing too defensively. You also start the game with a kick skill that can make early game combat an absolute cakewalk once you understand the stability mechanic. Open every fight with a kick, and as long as your opponent isn't blocking, they'll take a huge hit to their stability, usually allowing you to start stun locking them right away with a flurry of light attacks. Of course, how fast you'll be able to spam light attacks depends on what weapon you're using. Every weapon has their own strengths that you can use to your advantage. Swords have decent impact and damage, a diverse moveset that allows you to sidestep opponents, and they also have a great starting skill that applies a pain debuff to your enemies, making them take more physical damage. Axes have more damage and less impact, but have a moveset that incorporates a lot of multi-hit combos. They also get a starting skill that applies the pain debuff while also debuffing your enemy's movement speed. Maces are the slowest, but dish out the most impact damage, toppling over your opponents with ease. They pair well with offhand weapons like daggers and chakrams, and also get a starting skill that converts any elemental damage you take into an infusion on your weapon, making these great weapons for spellblades. You also have great swords, great axes, and that behave similarly to their smaller counterparts, but trade the utility of an offhand item for more damage and impact. Spears are great starter weapons as they have a deceptively long reach, allowing you to safely poke enemies and easily reposition yourself, and halberds trade a bit of reach for more crowd control capabilities. If all else fails, you could always just use a bow and cheese your opponents from a distance. I didn't cover all of the weapons, but you have a ton of options to choose from, with a lot of weapon skills that synergize with your character's build. Speaking of character building, you're probably wondering how you level up in this game, and you don't. Most of the damage you deal in this game will come from the many debuffs you'll be dealing to your enemies and the skills that you learn on your journey. You don't acquire skills by gaining experience or dumping stat points like other RPGs. Instead, your skills are purchased from trainers throughout the world that specialize in specific playstyles. That's right, you don't get stronger with experience, but with copious amounts of liquid capital. As odd of a choice this might seem, it actually fits very well with the gameplay loop as it further incentivizes going out and exploring. A lot of the high tier weapons and the materials to craft these higher tier weapons cannot be found in shops and need to be found in the open world. So everything blends together. Go out and explore, kill a bunch of stuff, fill your bag with loot, run back to town, sell your shit, and use that money to buy more skills and further power up your character. Outward has a very unique character building mechanic where you can learn basic skills from every trainer in the game, but you can also further enhance your skills and lean into a more specific playstyle by spending breakthrough points. The player has 3 breakthrough points that they can use to develop their character, with each trainer providing unique breakthrough perks that synergize with other breakthrough perks. For example, the Warrior Monk trainer provides incredibly good skills that focus on physical damage, and are usually a staple in any melee player's build. The Wild Hunter trainer specializes in skills that focus on impact damage, but gives the player more equipment options, giving them very useful bow skills and heavy-hitting attacks that favor great hammers. The Cabal Hermit tree plays well with most other breakthroughs as it amplifies the buffs you receive, as well as providing some other useful magic options, like summoning a buddy or infusing your weapon with wind to make it attack faster. There are a ton of trainers that teach a plethora of skills, and being able to choose 3 of these skill trees opens up a ton of possibilities for character builds. For example, I made a Spellblade character, and not the kind of Spellblade in most other RPGs where you're just a guy with a sword that can also cast spells. I mean, you're a person that literally casts spells from her fucking blade. This build makes use of the Kazite Spellblade tree to give me the Elemental Discharge skill. This allows you to turn whatever element that's infused on your weapon into a projectile. However, this will chew through your weapon's durability, so I paired this with the Runic Sage tree, allowing me to conjure a sword with unlimited durability. Obtaining the Runic Prefix passive also gives this conjured sword a holy infusion, allowing me to shoot lightning from my blade without having to load myself up on buffs. The third tree could really be anything, but I chose the Warrior Monk tree to even out my melee damage, making this build a lot more versatile. Now, many people would probably disagree with my choice of skill trees or opt to swap one skill tree out for another, but that's the beauty of the system. As you play the game, you'll be spending hours upon hours researching stuff on Wikipedia and developing your own plan for what skill trees you want to commit to. It's really hard to make a build that isn't viable, as all of these skill trees synergize well enough with each other that you can essentially just choose the 3 skill trees that appeal to you the most without severely screwing yourself. It makes you feel like an actual adventurer, traveling far and wide to various regions, eager to learn from the toughest trainers to become stronger. Not only is this the case for the skill trees, but this is also the case for unlocking mana in general. Magic is strong in Outward, and I mean really fucking strong. Having mana available to your character provides so many useful spells and skills at your fingertips. It's so strong, in fact, that you do not have mana at the start of the game. Instead, you unlock mana by ritualistically making a pilgrimage to Conflux Mountain and sacrificing your health and stamina to gain mana. The more health and stamina you sacrifice, the more mana you gain, and this decision cannot be reversed. Because mana must be learned in this way and it needs to be truly internalized and committed to, it makes Magic gameplay a lot more rewarding. In most other RPGs, literally any stinky commoner has the ability to conjure actual fucking flames from their hands and incinerate anything in their path. But Outward makes learning magic a journey in of itself. Conflux Mountain is such a significant landmark that there are different paths carved out to accommodate the different factions. Factions? Oh shit, I got completely sidetracked. We didn't even finish the first part of this quest. So once you figure out how to pay your blood price, or don't, and lose your house, you're then met with another choice. What faction do you want to choose? Outward has a very big story that has the same outcome, but you experience it through the differing perspectives of whatever faction you choose. The main story of Outward mostly focuses on the outbreak of the Scourge, which are basically just horrifically monsterized versions of your average Reddit user. They live in plumes of their own fart gas, usually in a cave or a basement somewhere. They're mostly unintelligible, and even the few ones who are intelligible and capable of human thought are still vehemently hostile to religious people and figures. Whew, that's going to make me lose a couple subscribers. So each faction has their own perspective of the Scourge problem while also having their own political problems to worry about. You have the aforementioned Blue Chamber Collective that's based in the Enmerkar forest. This is a metropolitan faction of the game that views people as bloodlines rather than individuals. They don't really care about the Scourge because they're too busy being overthrown by another faction. You have the Holy Mission of Elat based in the Hallowed Marsh, who are a religious group who seeks to cleanse the land of Aurai from the Scourge entirely. All in the name of this guy who branched off from the Blue Chamber's politics long ago and literally became God. Arguably the biggest flex in any action RPG. You also have the Sorobor Academy that's based in the Antique Plateau, a bunch of wizards and scientists who wish to study the Scourge, performing experiments on the sentient members of their species and possibly rewiring their hostile demeanor so they can coexist with humans. And then you have the Heroic Kingdom based in the Abrassar Desert. This is a group of raging libertarians who also disagreed with the Blue Chamber's politics, fucked off to an unknown, inhospitable area of the desert and proceeded to throw a massive party with strippers and cocaine. Surprise, surprise, they don't really like the Blue Chamber that much, meaning most of your time in this quest will be about preventing regicide and convincing all of the factions to focus on the real problem that is a scourge. And not only do you get differing narratives that intertwine with each other, but your chosen faction will also periodically reward you with more permanent buffs to add to your growing collection, as well as some unique pieces of armor. It's all up to you to forge your own path to conquer the challenges that lie before you. And with that, we should really talk about the true challenge that comes with this game. This game doesn't reward mastery of the combat system or getting good, it rewards preparation and exploration. In most other big blockbuster action RPGs, I find myself holding on to precious potions for that moment when I really need it, only to have it sitting in my inventory gathering dust because that moment never comes. Unless you play on a horrifically designed hard difficulty mode that pretty much just amplifies the damage your enemies deal while neutering yours, in which case I would need to use that potion, but it never feels rewarding in that sense. But having one set difficulty makes every encounter potentially deadly, so knowing that I may have survived that fight with a shell horror by laying down a bunch of tripwire traps and buffing myself with stamina boosting food before the fight makes the experience that much more enjoyable. In Outward, you're required to not only use your noggin, but also utilize all of the tools in your toolbox and all of the snacks in your lunchbox to tackle the challenges that lie before you. Dealing with cold weather? Bring some hot tea, maybe some fur clothes, and maybe a campfire kit to warm yourself up. Or just use magic and give yourself the warm boon if you don't want to carry all that shit. Hot weather? Stock up on plenty of water, wear lighter clothes, and feast on some delectable cactus fruit. Or just use magic and give yourself the cool boon. Remember when I said magic was strong as fuck? Outward has a fairly basic crafting and cooking system, but I really enjoy the survival crafting mechanic, which makes it possible to craft specific things without even knowing the recipe. As you play the game, you'll slowly start to memorize the recipes of useful foods you'll need, like cooked meat and sandwiches that give you passive health regen, and a variety of jelly that helps passively regen stamina. You'll start to memorize specific materials that you should keep so you can make upgrades to your equipment, like collecting predator fangs from hyenas to turn your iron weapons into fang weapons, giving them a faster attack speed and a chance to bleed your opponents. Consuming food and potions to buff yourself for a fight is critical, so remember to bring your water and Pop-Tarts because it can easily make the difference between your outstanding victory or your crushing defeat. Even with that, you're still probably going to die. A lot. But not to worry though, as this perfectly segues into the next cool mechanic that I don't see in other RPGs. Outward has a fairly unconventional combat system and a steep learning curve, which means that at some point you're probably going to get slapped. I mean, like absolutely mollywopped. I mean, undeniably annihilated. The game constantly saves itself, meaning no save scumming. If you die in Outward, well, tough shit, kid. Skill issue. L+ rate. Not to worry though, because as long as you're not playing hardcore mode, you will instead get a defeat scenario. There are over 120 different scenarios that can take place depending on where you were defeated, what bested you, and what quests you were trying to make progress in at the time. This adds a whole new layer to the role-playing aspect, as even dying in this game gets turned into an adventure. Sometimes you'll wake up on the side of the road with a restorative drink left over by a good Samaritan. Other times you'll wake up dazed and confused after being held in a dark cave being tortured by bugs. Sometimes the defeat scenario can even start a new quest or put you in a new location you've never seen before. For example, I was defeated by a pack of mercenaries while trying to complete a part of my faction quest. I was then ransomed off to a random person and set free, allowing me to sneak into the mercenaries' camp and grab my gear before making a run for it. Upon returning to town, I learned that the person who ransomed me was one of the higher-ups of the Sorobor Academy, who barred me from the town's merchants until I gave her an item to pay back the ransom money. It's so much more effective than a simple game over screen because it makes you truly fear death, unsure of how you'll end up after being torn apart by a beast golem. Your story gets continued even further through the legacy system, which is basically just a small alternative to the New Game Plus feature. Characters can leave items in these special legacy chests for new characters to discover, so long as the new character has that original character set as their ancestor. Some items even get upgraded through the legacy system, which encourages multiple playthroughs. This game has such an addicting gameplay loop, but if you ever get tired of it yourself, then you can always experience this game with a buddy, either online or through split screen. This is one of the few split screen games I've seen over recent years, and while there definitely isn't a huge demand for split screen nowadays, it's still really nice to have that as an option. Here's me playing with my girlfriend who is mostly unfamiliar with action RPGs.
I look like Cotton Hill.
I know, but you literally do. Make a killing blow on him. Yeah, there you go. I would chill until you gain some stamina because you're not going to be able to fight them. Oh, you're about to get fucked. Oh no. Oh, he got fucking mollywopped. I'll come and get you. Why?
Why not?
Hallowed is a special case for RPGs as the title is indicative of its main theme. You go outward. Leaving the comfort of the city to brave the unknown, armed only with your knowledge, your will to survive, and a backpack of varying amounts of carry weight. I often hear this game being referred to as a walking simulator, which is usually used as a pejorative term for games that don't have constant action. But Hallowed focuses on not only the destination, but the journey. It's a game where I actually have fun spending 30 minutes sifting through my bag, wondering if I should use that precious 6 pounds of carry weight in my bag to accommodate a tent and in case I get too tired, finally exit town, and only realize right at the end of the road, shit, I forgot to refill my water. You'll experience two stories with this game. The story of Aurai and its outcome, and there's your story. The small victories you'll accomplish, the defeats that'll make you stronger, the friends you'll meet along the way, as well as the enemies, the views you'll see, and the skills you'll learn. From the harsh desert to the tranquil town, and everything in between. The world of Aurai is yours to survive and conquer. As long as you're rich.